And now, here's the host of the Talent Talk Radio Show, CEO of People G2, Chris Dyer.
Good afternoon, and thank you for tuning in to Talent Talk. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and talk about who's on the show this week. My guest on the show will be Joe Patterson, founder of the Vested Group and Forbes Books author, The Big Commitment, Solving the Mysteries of Your ERP Implementation. Joel, welcome to the Talent Talk Radio Show.
Thank you, Chris. Happy to be here.
Fantastic. Well, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself? You know, what's important for us to know about you, and of course, let us know, you know, kind of what you do, what your company does, and the type of work that you tend to focus on.
Sure. As the book title says, we are in ERP consulting, and most people don't know what that is, and that's perfectly fine. It's another acronym for the IT world, but really what we do is we work with companies that are looking to grow their business or maybe go into new service lines and know that the software that runs their company isn't supporting them. And so we go in and work with them to define what their future state is going to look like. And we work with an Oracle product called NetSuite that can run their entire organization. And our job is to make sure that it does what it's supposed to do. Today, I know we're talking a lot about culture, and I'd say that our organization is definitely a culture first company. We work in an industry that is really challenging. You know, when we go in and do these implementations, it's very difficult. You know, I mean, we're changing everything for a company, and everybody's job is going to change. And so there's a lot of upset people a lot of times, right? Because most people don't like change. And so for us, having a solid culture for our consultants to rely upon is extremely important to keeping them engaged.
So as you go in to think about change, what's the first thing that you have to really identify or figure out if you're going to be successful in the long run in implementing that change?
Well, the first step is just admitting you have a problem, right? I mean, and being able to identify that and tell people, hey, this is going to be hard. No matter what you were told when somebody sold you something, going through an entire overhaul of your infrastructure like this is very difficult. And knowing that going in really kind of sets the stage. And so then as you're going through the project, you got to make sure you're continuing to touch base with those people. Let them know that struggle is okay. We have this thing we call the valley of despair. And really it's just a change curve. And again, recognizing that people are going to sink into that valley at some point during the project and get frustrated and angry. But know that if you stick with it and you follow the process and believe that you're going to get through it. And our job is to mitigate some of that risk and pave the way for them to get there and let them know that it is possible and they will be successful long-term.
So a lot of change management processes start, you know, with somebody defining value, someone saying, this is what we're really about, right? And sometimes it's well done, it's intentional. Sometimes it's a bunch of lip service with some words thrown up on a wall, right? So how do you kind of define what core values really are? And to that point, like, what are you seeing inside of organizations? Is this something that they're doing a really good job of being in tune with and being aligned with, or is it more the lip service and that's, you know, causing some of the issues that you're having that need the change?
You know, I think it's the tide is shifting, but there are still a lot of companies out there that either they don't believe or they haven't taken the time or they just don't know what to do. But, you know, if you look back in the last 20 years and things like mission statements and core values and things, they've unfortunately been thrown around with a little too much, a little too often, I guess, and don't necessarily have the oomph behind them that they need. And what we've tried to do is really take those seriously, define them in ways that people understand and that make sense and are simple to understand. We've defined 6 core values in our company. Our first one, own it, all in, give them your shirt, enjoy the ride, always do the right thing, and remember that failure results in learning. And each one of those has a description as to what that means, but we live and breathe them. Our hiring process includes those core values so that we can ask value questions while we're talking to the recruit, as well as our firing decisions. We've taken it to the point where if that person does not live up to those values, then that is a fireable offense. Now, obviously there's a lot of steps in between to get to that point, but you have to believe them and talk about them and make sure that they're constantly in people's consciousness, or they will just be a picture on a wall. and that's not going to really do any good for anybody.
Well, one of the things that I hear when you listed your core values was they were very specific, right? They were unique. There was some things in there I'd never heard before, like the, give the shirt off your back kind of a thing, right? That, you can tell that they were thought about and that they were intentional. I've done a lot of work with companies that go in and they'll be like, yeah, our core values are trust. And these very like generic words, right? And these are also the same companies that are saying right now, we've got to get our people back in here. They just can't possibly work and collaborate, remotely. And obviously their trust means, well, we could see you. We knew you were here. We didn't really trust you. We just trust our ability to watch you, right? Yes. And they weren't really tied, right? And so they just disconnect to the values, right?
For sure. And another piece that we really plays into this even more importantly is our purpose. And the purpose of our company is what we call best job ever. And what we're trying to do is we want people, when they are retired someday and they're talking to their grandkids about their career, and their grandkids says, hey, well, tell me about the best job you ever had. We want them to talk about their time here. And that means something different for each person, right? And what we actually need to do to keep them engaged and motivated. But those values support that. And they allow us to be able to really have any conversation that we need. One of the values that is most difficult for us to really dive into is the remember that failure results in learning, but it's the most important as far as I'm concerned. My company, the Vested Group, this is the second company that I've founded. And my first company, we did really well early on for 5, 6, 7 years and took off. And it really did well because the owners were able to be involved in the culture. But as we grew, we didn't have a plan to support that. We didn't really know what to do with it as people became virtual. And when I started this company, it was from day one, hey, I learned that is not the right way to do it, and that this is the most important thing. And we built our focus and our goals around that. And it's served us really well in a tough industry.
So, I know you're sort of on the technical side, and you're going in and providing, a particular technological approach into a change management system or to get people, the help that they need. But do you think there's something that we need to think about doing on that side of it, around culture, around social media, about, the intentionality of how is it the things that the technology and the non-human parts, right? This is not HR supporting culture. This is how does the technical side of it support culture from your perspective?
Yeah, it definitely does. And I think the mistake that some companies make is that they think just implementing new technology is going to solve their problems. And really, it still takes the people behind the scenes to make it happen. I'll give you a good example. We use Slack very extensively in our organization, mm-hmm. and we also use Tiny Pulse. Which is, if you're not familiar with it, it's an HR tool. It provides a lot of different things. But one of the things that it does is it creates a Slack channel for us called Cheers for Peers. And what that allows you to do is you can at any time, if you are working with one of your colleagues and they exemplify a core value that you want to share with the rest of the company, you go in there to that Slack channel and you can do a Cheers for Peers for them. You reference the value that you saw and you give an example, and the whole company sees it. And it's a very simple thing, but I can tell you, even just today, there's been 3 or 4 of them. It happens every single day. And it's a very simple way to make sure that those values are continuing to be in the consciousness, in the conversation. And it allows you, especially in this time of COVID, to stay connected with people. It allows you to see what they're working on, what they're doing, how they're going above and beyond. Out of those Slack communications, additional conversations will happen. And for us, what we've done, I think is really creative, is every time that somebody gets that, a cheer, is we have a sticker that represents that core value, and we take that sticker and we put it on our laptop. And it's kind of like, Ohio State and has their wins on their helmet with stickers. It's the same thing. And what that does is it allows us to, I've got stickers on my laptop, and I can't tell you how many times if I'm at the airport or if I'm working with a prospect, they'll ask me about them, and it gives us an opportunity to continue to talk about our culture, because that's really, we're in consulting. Our product is really our people. And so it allows us to talk to customers about how we invest in those people and make sure that we keep them close. And it really starts with the technology piece. So it's all important, but you still have to have the intention on the other side from the people. So
I would like to kind of break this down a little bit for those that are listening, because this is really, really important. We use a similar type thing in our company. We use Slack, and we have just a water cooler room, and that's where we go and we do it. And I love the sort of addition that you've added on, right? Which is to really go back and have these stickers and have some way to additionally celebrate it for the long term. But I think what's important for people to remember is there was a specific place on a specific technology. There's a specific way to do it, and anyone can do it, right? This is not top down. This is not my manager had to tell everyone else I did a good job. This is anyone can nominate anybody. And so you've removed that hierarchy, removed all of the power and the politics and the butt kissing and all of that by making this a flat thing, right? That's anyone can nominate anybody for exemplifying this, right? You've identified what's important, and now you're celebrating it. And I think that's really awesome. And kudos to you guys for adding on that extra element of adding it to your computer so that when COVID's over and you're going to see more people, all right, it's a conversation starter, and then they can know more about you. I think that's super important, which I find those types of programs to be far more beneficial than rewards-based programs. Are going to give out some Starbucks card, or we're going to take a tally of how many times you got mentioned and you get 5 points or something. Like, it gets gamed, it gets forgotten. This is far more memorable, I think, the way that you guys have decided to approach it.
Yeah, there's no doubt. You're right. It's not, I've never even thought about it as a way for somebody to kiss up at all. To be honest with you, I probably get fewer cheers than just about anyone else because I'm not in the weeds with right. A lot of the people that I work with, and that's great. I love that. I don't need the accolade. I like it just like anybody does. I feel good about it when somebody says that, but I sure love giving them out too. I mean, mm-hmm. it's because it allows me to interact with people that I don't get to necessarily interact with a lot. And so if I find myself in a meeting with them and they ask a good question or whatever, it just, there's just always reasons to give somebody a pat on the back. And I think in COVID culture, it's even more important that we find ways to do that and to make sure people feel validated and that they're recognized for the efforts that they're putting in. Because you mentioned earlier about, companies that didn't have a culture and that hadn't focused on culture, and yeah, they got to be hurting right now. But it doesn't change the fact that companies like ours that have focused on culture, our people are still hurting too, and we want to really go above and beyond to make sure that they know that we're out there, we care. We are interested in what's going on in your daily life. And if there's anything that we can do to support you, let us know. And it really gives us the avenue to do that.
Right. And just to say it again, people just want your attention. They just want that pat on the back. They want that, hey, this was something that I saw that you really did well. This connects to what we're trying to do. And of course they want, hey, this is what you could maybe do better next time. Where can you, improve? But we spend so much time worrying about how do we give feedback to people when really what they want most is where am I doing well, right? And how did I do well? And recognizing that they did well, and again, making it public, right? At some level, it's not pulling someone up on the stage and everybody wants to be brought in front of the room, but at least there's some level of it can be seen across the organization so that they, there's that level of people can know that they're good at this thing. If somebody needs someone to do that thing, well, I know Susie keeps getting this award for that. I'm going to bring them into this project or into this, client meeting or whatever it may be. So, I just want to kind of reiterate that for anyone who's listening, because it's a super important point. They're simple things and they're subtle, but they're hugely important. And I think most recognition programs gloss over it because they want you to buy gift cards from the company so they can make money, or they want, some other part of this just isn't working. So
yeah, those $5 gift cards, they just sort of slip into somebody's pocket and you don't even think about it. And it even goes back to pay, right? And what is salary? How does that play into culture and how people feel? And by no means is salary is important, right? It is absolutely important, but it is a data point. You've got to make sure that your people are paid equitably, they feel valued that way, but then they can move on. And it's all this other stuff that really makes a difference. You're not going to be able to get away with underpaying people because you're investing in something else, not in my business at least. And I don't want to. I want to pay people what they deserve, but I don't really want that to be the main conversation. And especially in hiring, and that unfortunately becomes a big part of it. Well, you wrap that with everything else that we've got going on, and all of a sudden the picture looks much different as they're making their decision.
Yeah, I always thought those companies that do like, here's a 1% salary increase each year or some like tiny thing. It's like, you don't even notice it on your check. You don't feel good from that, right? They'd be better off like handing you that 1% in the middle of the year for some random reason as a bonus, if that's what they wanted to do. And even that I think is misplaced, but like, how do you even notice 1% on your check?
Yeah,
By
and
the time
it kind of comes down to the jelly of the month club with with Clark
Right.
Griswold, right?
Right. Like, how is this helpful to me?
Yeah.
So, you've hit on the recognition part, you've hit on the values part as well. But what else should we be thinking about from a culture focus, especially maybe during the interview process?
Well, I tell you that, I mean, you've got to hire for culture fit and drive first. Obviously, you're looking for skills, but you've really got to make sure that they fit the culture. Otherwise, they're going to flame out. And I've found that in really strong cultures, good strong cultures, the culture sort of takes care of the people that accidentally get in that aren't a fit, right? And not in a bad way. There's nothing wrong with them necessarily. It just means that it's not for them, and that's okay. And the culture kind of weeds those people out. But you've really got to put the extra effort into the front end interview process. We do this thing called a Sunday test that we ask people to think about when they're interviewing candidates, and that is, if this person is sitting across from you came to work here and they called you on a Saturday night and said, hey, I've got this deadline. I really need your help tomorrow on Sunday. Can you come into the office and help me out? How are you going to respond? And that is that's going to be different for everyone. And you're just interviewing this person. You don't really know them, but you got to trust your instinct here, because you know the types of people that you're trying to bring in. You know what works and what doesn't. And really think about that. Do they pass the Sunday test? And if they do, then they'll move on to the next round. But sometimes you just get that feel that this person is in it for a different reason, and that's not going to work here.
Yeah, and some people are really good at talking the talk. I mean, they can say that they agree with that, but then, can they give you an example right in the past? Can they demonstrate that this is something they've done on a consistent basis at their job or their past jobs? I mean, that's where I find people struggle sometimes if they're not quite that person, if they're not quite aligned. It's, if I said, if I was working this weekend, I really needed someone, would you help me out? Oh yeah, sure I would. But then when you hire them, they're like, nowhere to be found.
It's like when somebody asking you to help you move.
Yeah, of course I would help you. Oh, Saturday? No, I'm busy.
Yeah. You have a truck, right? Let's go. Yeah, no, it's going to be different by person, but I think that people understand the concept, and it allows you to get to some of those behavioral type of questions that are the most important ones to answer as you're going through this. Now, like whenever I interview somebody, I rarely talk about their skill set. It's always about fit and how they are. Now, there's other people that are going to interview them that are going to really drill into their skill set, and that is important, but I'm not looking for that at all. I really want to know, is this a person that I want to spend time with? Because, one of the things that I really focus on is this concept of work-life balance. And I hate that term because I think it implies that one is good and the other one is bad. And that's not reality, right? Nobody really is able to completely turn off their job when they go home, and vice versa. I mean, if you have a bad day at home, you're probably going to have a bad day at work. And recognizing that is a big part of our culture as well, that hey, I'm not asking you to work a million hours, but I want to know that you're doing okay personally, and not into their details or anything, but just knowing that they're managing okay, because I know that is going to keep them more engaged and more productive at work as well. And it's just the right thing to do. And so if you recognize that it's not taboo to get to know somebody personally and care about them, that is actually part of making sure that you've got a culture that works. And I think a lot of times people, especially with this kind of world of compliance, HR compliance that we've fallen into these days, they worry about being able to ask some of those questions or get to know somebody personally. And I completely disagree with that. There's a way to do it without being invasive, but it's important to have that personal connection to really know whether or not this person's going to fit.
And to know if they're going to fit, I think it often will take more than, just speaking to one manager who's maybe the direct report, or maybe just the senior team. I mean, what are your thoughts on maybe having the candidate really interact with the everyday staff and people that they're going to have to work with as a way to, discover if they're going to be a good fit?
Yeah, I think you're really doing yourself a disservice if you don't. So the way our process is pretty well defined. And the first thing that we do is we ask people to send us a 2-minute video. And we don't give them much instruction. We just say, hey, tell us why you're a good fit for the vested group. And the thing is that's interesting about that is maybe the first couple of times you watch one of those videos, you're not going to gather a lot of information from it. But when you watch 100 of them, you really see a difference in the candidates, and it helps set the stage and just make sure that they're a good fit for you. And then when we bring them in, we go through several rounds at different levels of people, because in my mind, if that candidate isn't interviewing you as well, then there's something off. You want them interacting with different levels in the organization, because it's one thing for me to say what we're about, but it's another for somebody that's been working here 6 months and somebody that's been working here 5 years to tell you what they see. Making sure that you have the opportunity to interact with them at various levels, and making sure that they feel comfortable that the people that we have already fit within what their expectations are is just as important. So I would absolutely encourage anyone to let your staff or your recruits talk to different levels of the staff, and find a way to have a casual setting, whether it's over lunch or something like that, to really be able to have a conversation that's not over in a boardroom or something. Right. Take a little bit of the pressure off and allow them to kind of free flow.
Well, 2 quick questions. We're almost out of time here. The first is there a book that you're reading these days that you might suggest people check out?
Well, this isn't this isn't going to surprise anyone, maybe, because it's pretty popular already. But I'm almost done with Bill Gates' new book, How to Avoid a Climate Disaster. And I got to tell you, that guy, he's obviously a genius, right? But the way that he's able to take complex scenarios and boil it down to something that any of us can understand is really remarkable. And it's a great read. I'd encourage anybody to take a look at it.
And most importantly, how can people get a hold of you if they're interested in learning more or wanting to work with you?
So the company domain is thevested.com, or you could go to joelpatterson.com. Either way, I would love to learn about you, your business, what your goals are, and see where we might be able to help.
Well, Joel, thank you so much for being a great guest today and sharing some fantastic insights. I'd love to have you come back at some point and share with us all the cool stuff that your company's doing.
Thank you, Chris. It's a pleasure to be here. Right. Look forward to next time.